Hi, welcome to the next chapter. In the previous chapters, we have covered the sidelines and the main lines of the Manhattan system. We are nearing its end, and in this chapter, we would be looking at one of the white sidelines, this time not with bishop g5 or c into d5, but with the bishop f4 system. So d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, knight bd7. This is the starting point of the Manhattan system. And here we have checked bishop g5, c d5. Also, we are yet to check queen c2, which we'll check in the further chapters. But here we would be covering bishop f4. This is what Shanklin gives, but with the very important inclusion of c into d5, e into d5, and then bishop f4. With 5 bishop f4, white's not committing to a plan yet, and we have a few choices. D into c4 is a very possible option, but I want to keep it simple. I want to keep our plans consistent, and let's play bishop b4. Idea, very simple. We are exerting pressure on the diagonal. We want to play as similar as we can with the previous lines which we have already checked. Now white has a few choices. There is queen b3 as usual, there is e3, there is a3, and of course c into d5. So c d5, e d5 transposes to a chapter which we have already covered previously. Queen b3, as we have already seen multiple times, the queen's bad here. We play c5 with the typical idea of queen a5 or a5, knight e4, and putting pressure on the c3 knight. If white takes, we are very happy to take back, and we have the option of playing c4 later on. So queen b3, c5, dc5, the only independent try. I am sorry, for c d5, we don't take back. If I remember well, we play castle and transpose to a line which we have already checked. I'm sorry for that. Yeah, d into c5, a5. The idea, this time we don't play queen a5. We play a5 with the idea knight c5 and maybe some d4 ideas later on. We also want to play knight e4 and put a lot of pressure on this c3 knight. Let's go back. So instead of queen b3, if white plays a3, we already know this is slow. We want to take on c3, takes, and because white hasn't played e3 yet, our knight's on d7, this pawn is unprotected. We play d into c4. Idea, very simple. If you play e3, I want to play knight b6 or b5. So white's only way to try and recover the pawn is by playing queen a4. And now we play b6. We want to get the bishop to the most active diagonal, push c5, play rook c8, and exert pressure on the weak pawn on c3, the outpost on d5, and this fantabulous diagonal. Queen c4. If white plays e3, we just play bishop b7, get the bishop out, bishop c4, castle, castle, c5. And let's talk about this position from a strategic viewpoint. White has a poor pawn on c3, so the pawn structure is in black's favor. We are about to take on f3, which would spoil white's kingside pawn structure as well as the king safety in general. We are about to play rook a c8, exert pressure on this diagonal, on this file. The queen on a4 is misplaced. The bishop on c4 is in the way, is vulnerable, can be attacked. I just think black's position is very much better at least from a practical viewpoint. Another interesting attempt could be to play queen c6. The idea is white is creating a triple threat against the pawn on c4, the pawn on c7, and the rook on a8. What do? We play bishop a6. The queen's now defending the rook, and the c4 pawn is guarded. Black's idea? We want to play knight d5 next, control the c7 pawn, and attack the bishop on f4. Queen into c7. You can't take with the bishop, because after queen c8, followed by bishop b7, knight e4, this pin is very dangerous for white. Queen into c7. Now what this does is, we can take, and use simple tactics to our favor. This is hanging, knight d5. Attacking the c7 bishop, the pawn on c3, and making sure that the c4 pawn is guarded. White needs to retreat with the bishop, and after which we'll take the pawn on c3 and remain a pawn up. So this doesn't work. Pretty much the only response is queen into c4, and we play bishop b7. Again, if we get c5, rook c8 in, we would gain a tempo with c into d4. We are attacking this pawn. The bishop's putting a lot of pressure here. White's king is in center. The bishop is undeveloped. So from a strategic viewpoint, black is clearly pushing here. And if white takes on c7, again, bishop c7, there's a pin from the c file. I can play queen c8. I can even try rook c8 with the idea that takes, and I have pressure, but I would play queen c8. Knight d5 is coming. Bishop d5 is coming. White is losing material. Queen c7, takes, and now I play rook c8 with a skewer. The bishop goes back. I pick the pawn back, and okay, white has the pair of bishops, but just look at the activity of black's pieces and the disharmony in white's position. The bishop on f1 needs 2 moves to get out. The king is in center, while the rook on h1 is dead. And look at black's position, yeah? The rook on c3 is very well placed. The knight's joining in. The bishop is fantastic here. After castling, this rook might come to c8, and there's a lot of pressure from black's point. White might be fine, but from a practical viewpoint, it's very dangerous. So let's go back. Pretty much the only strong independent try is e3. White is not connecting to cd5 yet, and therefore we don't play knight e4 because white hasn't played cd5. What do? We play c5. This is also a very natural reaction. We are trying to undermine white's center, trying to get away, disrupt white's space advantage. White has a few choices again, but I think critical is a3 and bishop d3. It's important to note that unlike the bishop g5 lines, white can't play cd5 because after knight d5, the knight on c3 is hanging, and we can win the bishop pair with knight f4. You don't want to allow that, and if we win the bishop pair, we would open up the position, finish our development, and start striking in the center. If you play a3, by now I have repeated this 100 times that we take, put pressure on c3 with queen a5. Then we want to play knight e4, castle, b6, bishop a6, exchange this bishop and put pressure on these squares, c4 being outpost and the e4 square being a very good spot for the knight, since f3 is not really possible. If white goes bishop d3, we again know that we start with cd4, ed4 and dc4. We only want to take on c4 when white has spent time with bishop e2 or bishop d3. Otherwise, the bishop comes in one go. Bishop into c4. So now this bishop on f4 is misplaced. In these QGD structures, you want, especially with the isolated pawn, you want the bishop to be on g5. We also have an added advantage of this bishop being on c4, so there might be some threats on the c file. We play a6. Idea very straightforward. We want to play b5. We want to play bb7. Then get knight b6, knight d5 in, bring the knight to the outpost, put pressure on c3. And very important to note, you castle first. Make sure your king's safe. Now white has two ideas, either to play short castle and allow us to play b5, or to stop b5 with a4. This stops b5, but gives us a fantastic outpost on b4. We play knight b6, bishop goes back, and knight d5 with a double attack on f4 and c3. That's why you want this bishop to be on g5 in these positions. And if you're retreating to d2, we just play b6, bb7, finish development with short castle, and black is better because of the better pawn structure and more active pieces, namely because of the d5 square controlling the outpost. What we want to do, we want to exchange pieces, go into the endgame where we would be able to exploit white's poor pawn structure. If white goes castle, we just play b5, bishop d3. Bishop b3 castle is not really a problem for us. Bishop b7 is coming. The bishop is putting pressure. This bishop is putting pressure on c3. d4 square is weak. Knight b6 is coming. Rook c8 is coming. All of your pieces are flowing. The queen would come to e7. The other rook would come to d8. You would put pressure on the d4 square. The bishop is putting pressure on the f3 knight. Knight might come to c5. Your pieces are just flowing around here. And if bishop d3, same. Bishop b7, same ideas. Castle, rook c8, knight b6, knight d5. You might also chip in with bishop c3, spoil white's pawn structure, and gain an outpost on the c4 square. We have a much better version of the typical IQP positions, and this just feels very comfortable for black. All right, so this was the end of the chapter on fifth bishop f4 for white. I hope you liked it, and we'll see you soon in the next chapter.